So hi guys, welcome to the third video in our React state management series. So the first two videos we talked about the React use state and then the React use reducer. So today we want to look at a very important hook in React state management, and that is the React context API. So what is the React Context API? The React Context API is basically a way to manage state by passing data globally or making the data state available globally without provisioning. Provisioning is a situation where you pass data between different levels of components. So you have a grandparents component, for instance, and you're passing data to the parents component, and the parent component is passing data to the children component. So that is basically what provisioning is. So in today's video, we'll be looking at when to use the React Context API, how to use the React Context API, and then drawbacks for the React Context API. If that sounds exciting to you, please leave a like, and of course, please do not forget to subscribe. This is basically what we have. We have been basically working on a simple counter application just to demonstrate concept. Now, I improved the styling a bit. This is just what it looks like. Now, I'm going to try and recreate this using the React Context API. Now, if you look, we have like a state that is the counter itself, and then a way to like update the state. So I'm going to go into the counter provider. Now I'm going to import create context from React. So export cost counter provider is equal to now the first thing we want to do here is create the context. So say counter context is equal to create context, and let's pass in default values. So like I said, let's create an interface for our counter. So we have the count, which is a number. We also have increase count. Let's have increase count, just and decrease count. Going to pass the type here. So now let's have the count number. Sorry, going to pass in default values rather. So you have increase count, decrease count. So we have our default value created already. So let's create the states now. So we have count, set count, go to use state number. So we have to import use state from React as well, and let's just pass in 0. So then let's create the const increase count function is equal to set count to be count plus 1. Going to copy this, paste this, and then have decrease count to be count minus 1, and then now what this counter provider is going to return counter context dot provider and then this counter provider is going to take in children, which is a GSS element. So react node, and for this to work, we need to import. Okay, we can just import React node. So now we're going to pass in the children here. Now this counter context takes in the value. Now for this value, we're going to pass in our count. We're going to pass in the increase count. We're going to pass in the decrease count. And now we already have successfully created a context provider. So let me just go through what is happening here. We have a create context that is used to create the context or the data that you want to pass. So now you can see in this part, what we want to make available globally is these three data. That is the count, and the function to increase the count, the function to decrease the count. Then we are passing in default values while creating the context. Here we have count to be 0, and then we have this void function here. So now this part is where we create the states. Then increase count, we define what the increase count does, define what the decrease count does, and pass it to the context provider which traps the children. And all of the components that will be classified under this children, that is all of the components that will be under this context provider, will be able to access that state without needing prop drilling. So just to keep things clean, there's one other thing needed, that is the use context, and usually you use it in the components where you want to use the context, but I like to keep things clean and just create the logic here. So I'm going to export const use counter provider. So first, we want to check that if this context is not detected. So if not use context counter context, again to throw an error. I see. Please use within the counter context provider. So this happens when the user tries to access any of these states without wrapping in a particular component that is not wrapped under the provider. So otherwise, let's just return use context pro counter context. So now we can go into this demo. Now we can remove this. We are no longer working with the use reducer hook. Now we can remove this. And now we want to import the use counter provider that we just created. So now we can destructure those properties that we defined in the context. So we have our count, we have our increase count, and we have our decrease count. Nice. So we can pass in the count since that is the state. Then for this patch, you can just remove that, put increase count, remove this, use decrease count. Now if I try to go to the browser, I should get an error. I should get an error. Let's see. Yeah. Don't know why it is, but yeah, I don't know if this is playing, but you can see that it is not working, can't decrease or increase, and that is because this component accessing the counter provider has not been wrapped under the context, the context provider. Like I'm trying to access the data, but I'm not wrapping the content, this component under the provider. So I'm just going to come here. Usually this is the Next.js project, so usually I have a provider where I can wrap use all of my context. So I'm just going to import the counter provider and then going to wrap all of this with the counter provider. So now if you go back into the application, this should work correctly. Okay, so you're importing the needs. Okay, I'm going to go into the counter provider and have a use client. So you can see you'll be able to recreate the same stuff, same feature using the create context. This is just one level of component. This is just one level of component. So this is not like its typical use case for the React Context API. I just like created it just to show you how to set it up and how to use it within a component. Now, what's the typical use case? It is used when basically you have a lot of components that need to access the same data. For instance, local preference for language settings or internationalization, or theme settings, the light or dark theme, or like user data. We want to get data about a particular user that is logged in. Now let's take one of those, for instance, for like the theme provider. You know that lot of components, in fact basically every component in the application needs to access the theme. You want to know, okay, if this is the application on light mode, is the application on dark mode. And imagine when you have like several components, like hundreds of components in the application, it will be like a mess or a headache to like be passing such data like through pub dealing. And this is where the React Context API is very beautiful. You can see we are able to access all of this data, the count, increase, decrease count, by just importing this use context provider and then destructuring the access data. So this is when to use a React Context provider. We have talked about how to use it, and now when to use it when you have need to pass data or share data across a lot of components. That is a particular good use case for the React Context API. So what are the drawbacks for React Context API? So one of the drawbacks is the issue with rendering. That is like the particular drawback with React Context API. So I'm going to explain what that means. So let's say you have like shared states across several components. I'm going to try and illustrate that. So let's say you have shared states across several components. You have data A, you have data B, you have data C, you have data D, and then you have 3 components per se. And then this component has access to just this data. This component has access to just this data. This component has access to just this data. Now, one of the issues with React Context API's dimension is with React rendering. So is with re-rendering, unnecessary re-rendering. So let's say only this data changes in the context API, or this data changes in the context that we have created. Normally, the right thing to happen, or the right thing we should expect to happen, is that all these components should be updated. So this is the component that is subscribed to that particular data. But one weird behavior with the React Context API is that all of these components re-renders. So components will definitely re-render whether they have access to that particular data that changed in the state or not. And this is one of the drawbacks. Another drawback is that it reduces reusability of a component. So if you want to be really careful how you use React Context API, because you can reduce how your component can be reused. So those are like drawbacks for the React Context API, but overall I think it's a great entry into global state management. Okay, that's it for today. I hope this video helped you understand the concept of the React Contest API. If it helped you, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you have any question, please drop them in the comment box below. We'll be back next time with another video on React State Management. Thank you and bye.
Flashback.
So I hope this helped you, and if you did, please leave a like and then subscribe. We'll be continuing.